Whatever your own politics, this is a really big moment. Labour could now be an opposition that gets things done and carries out effective scrutiny, irrespective of anyone's ideas. Labour under Corbyn struggled to ever do that. That was 1 year ago, Michael, that tweet after Keir Starmer became leader of the Labour Party. Do you recognise that tweet?
Yes, I do, because we, of course, used that when we were reviewing Keir Starmer's 1 year as leader. But, of course, that video seems a bit redundant now because we've had the local election and the great British public have also reviewed Keir Starmer's 1 year as leader.
And just like Laura Kuenssberg, they think Keir Starmer did a great job, right?
I'm trying to think of a funny way of saying no.
And that's because the answer, of course, is no, Michael. And even if you aren't funny, the answer is still no. Labour did not have a good May the 6th election. Basically, just to give some context, the 6th of May elections were, basically a bunch of elections were held. You had council elections, you had mayoral elections, we had elections for the Scottish Parliament, where Nicola Sturgeon was trying to get a majority for the SNP. You had the Welsh Parliament elections, and you also had a by-election, the Hartlepool by-election. And that was the big question of the night. Would Labour manage to hold on? And we'll get into that specific election later. But firstly, Michael, of course, let's just talk about the overall night for Labour. And, well, it was a really bad night for Labour. Atrocious, really. That's not to say there were not some good results sprinkled in here and there. Andy Burnham, for instance, in Manchester did a good job, or Mark Drayford in Wales. But, we'll discuss that in a video we're doing next about what Labour can learn, or what they could learn if they wanted to, from those successes. But overall, on the 6th of May, it was an awful election day for Labour. As you can see from this graphic on screen, it says seats gained or lost by leaders of the opposition in the first local elections of their leadership. As you can see, in 1995, Labour gained 14%. In 2011, they gained 9%. Pretty much in every single election, the leader of the opposition gains in their first local elections. Jeremy Corbyn didn't. He lost 1% of the vote, and that was considered, a disaster, like how shocking, etc. And, at the time, given the context, that would make sense. But then you see how Keir Starmer has performed. Minus 7%. That is otherworldly bad. That's not even bad. That is shocking. Labour lost nearly 300 seats in total and control of about 8 councils. That is not good. Labour also had their worst ever result in Scotland. They picked up their fewest seats ever and their fewest vote share ever. Sadiq Khan in London just managed to get past Sean Bailey on first preference votes by 5%, which is shocking considering London, of course, is Labour territory, and Sean Bailey was a god-awful candidate. Sadiq Khan might have even lost the first preference vote to the Conservatives if Sean Bailey wasn't the Tory candidate, which is absolutely wild to think about in London. And of course, there was the Tees Valley mayoral election, continuing this theme, which was won back in 2% in 2017 by the Conservatives. But of course, this time around, as you can see on screen, Labour lost it by quite a bit more. The Conservatives managed to rack up 73% of the votes, while Labour got 27%. Again, 4 years ago, that was 50-50, and this time it was an absolute blowout win for the Conservatives. And that was all bad, of course, Michael, but the main headline from that night, and the worst part for Labour probably, was the fact that they lost the Hartlepool parliamentary by-election. They lost it big as well. This is a seat that Labour had held since 1974, when it was, created. They've held it for generations, and they lost it. And they didn't just lose it by a small amount. Keir Starmer and Labour lost it by a huge amount. As you can see on screen from the graphic, the Conservatives picked up 52% of the vote, while Labour picked up only 28.7% of the vote. Even though the Brexit Party did not stand in this election, even though they did in 2019, Labour somehow managed to lose the share of the vote. Labour went from about 38%, as you can see, to about 29%. Even though the Brexit Party aren't standing, they lost votes. Now, people were saying beforehand that the Conservatives may take this because, the Brexit Party, all those voters will go to the Conservatives and that'll tip them over the edge. But Labour had a worse share of the vote somehow, some way. And as you can see, the Conservatives won by about 23%. So, all in all, Michael, a pretty bad night for Labour.
Yeah, also, I like how defeatist it is to just be like, well, we can't expect to, win any of the voters who voted for the Brexit Party. And it just shows how Labour have no idea what it is their voting coalition is going to be.
Yeah, exactly, Michael. There was an air of defeatism beforehand in Hartlepool because, people were saying, well, the Brexit Party voters, they'll vote with the Conservatives and Labour will lose. But yeah, then then Labour actually lost votes themselves. So yeah, that was pretty damn embarrassing. But the thing was, Michael, it wasn't only Conservatives who Labour were losing to. They were also losing to other parties, like the Green Party, for instance, in England. As you can see, this is a graphic from Bristol showing the Green Party gained 13 councillors in 2021, while Labour lost 13. Meaning that on the Bristol Council, there are now 24 Green councillors and 24 Labour councillors. Now that was, again, a Labour heartland, and somehow, someway, they have lost control of that council. Again, not to the Conservatives, but this time to the Green parties. So yeah, plenty of parties are taking all these votes off Labour, it seems.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the reality that they, like I say, do not know what their voting coalition is going to be. Obviously, they're failing to secure any of the votes of people who voted for the Brexit Party, which I guess in general terms you'd say are kind of your right-wing, more sort of, I guess, patriotic types. But also, they're losing to the Greens, who are kind of your liberal cosmopolitan party. So they're kind of stuck in the middle, and it seems like it's quite lonely in the particular very narrow niche they've got themselves in politically.
Yeah, you're right. They're losing votes to a socially conservative party and a socially liberal party at the same time. Yeah, not the best situation to be in if you're Labour. But there's an extra reason why these elections are particularly bad for the Labour Party, Michael, and that is because of its leadership, and its leader specifically, Keir Starmer. Now, of course, the Labour right wing and all, the centrists in that party and, in the wider public, over the last few years, while Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, consistently said that Corbyn was unelectable. There was the famous line from, the likes of James O'Brien, who said that any other Labour leader would be 20 points ahead in the polls. Well, here we are. It's another Labour leader. And he's done as much as possible, has Keir Starmer, to distance himself from Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, he suspended him, after all, and he has dropped all of Corbyn's policies from the 2019 manifesto, which he lied about, by the way, in his leadership election. He said he would not do that, but he did it anyway. He has tried to make himself as far as possible from Jeremy Corbyn, and yet, somehow, he has done worse. The whole point of electing Keir Starmer from a Labour perspective was, well, this guy is, I guess, yeah, he's electable. He can connect with the British public. And he's failing to do that even more than Jeremy Corbyn did. And that's why these elections sting that little bit more, or a lot more, I should say, for all these Labour centrists who basically, the argument for so long was, of course, if you get Jeremy Corbyn out, Labour are going to walk in because of how bad the Tories are. Well, it seems that Labour are even further behind with Corbyn out and Starmer in. What do you make of that, Michael?
Yeah, well, the thing is, you don't even need to have the idea that Labour are going to walk in. Obviously, I think there were some people saying that there was going to be some residual damage left over from Corbyn. So there were some kind of anti-Corbyn people who were saying Labour's still going to struggle under Keir Starmer, but it will be because of Corbyn. And that hasn't been manifested at all in reality. This isn't the kind of aftermath of Corbyn's failed leadership, let's say. This is a whole new series of failures that have got them to this point because they are doing worse than Corbyn did.
No, don't you see, Michael? The voters hated Corbyn so much that they kind of voted for him in 2019, but to punish Labour that a bit more, they really voted against them in 2021 just to make Starmer and all of Labour know they really hated Corbyn. Just don't try that again. I mean, that is kind of the perverse logic of some Starmer fans or Labour centrists that we've seen after the election, which again we'll get onto in our next video. But yeah, Michael, again, Labour, disaster. There's no getting away from it. Yes, again, they had some good results, but overall, a pretty damn poor night for them. The question is, though, Michael, and this is what we're going to be talking about next, why did this happen? Why did Labour on the 6th of May have such a poor performance? And there are two categories of reasons, I guess. Short-term reasons and, of course, long-term reasons. And we are going to go through the short-term reasons first. And for this analysis, we are going to be talking a lot about Hartlepool, simply because there is a lot of data. That was the big headline from that night. So, for instance, Paul Williams, the candidate for Hartlepool, he was a shit candidate by any means. Of course, Keir Starmer selected him personally. There was no other person on the shortlist, and yeah, he turned out to be uninspiring and pretty dreadful. Also, Labour's message in this election was shit. I mean, I don't know if they even had a message. I don't know what you could hang your hat on and say, yes, this is why you should vote for Labour in 2021. And also, crucially, Keir Starmer was shit. We went through in our last video about Starmer, the 1 year anniversary, about how 70% of voters in Hartlepool supported a raise of nurses' pay by 5 or 10%. And you would think that would be an easy tap in, especially for a Labour leader to campaign on that in a place like Hartlepool, wouldn't you say? Well, he didn't do that. And I think this interview on Good Morning Britain from Starmer says it all on why he was a very shit leader in this election. Just watch.
Presenting nurses says that the fair deal would be 12.5%. Would you back that, yes or no?
Well, what I've said is we would start at the 2.5% that was guaranteed, legislated for, and would negotiate up from there. It would have to be a negotiation. But believe you me, I've spent
between 2.5 and 12.5%.
Well, I appreciate that. But I happen to have spent a lot of time in hospitals, spent a lot of time with NHS staff, as it happens. And what they want is a pay rise, a fair pay rise. They do not want a pay cut. That is the stark difference between the Labour Party and the government on this issue.
So yeah, Michael, he spent a lot of time in hospitals, hasn't he? And yeah, he's listened to what nurses want to say. And they have said they want a 12.5% pay rise. But because he's listened so much, he's actually only offering them a 2.5% pay rise. I don't know, I think that was his logic.
It seemed as if what he was saying is like the most important thing to them is that they get a pay rise rather than a pay cut. And therefore, because he's offering them a pay rise rather than a pay cut, that's the main thing. So basically, what he's saying is it's like walking in there and being like, talking about free childcare and going, actually, I spoke to parents. It turned out the most important thing for them is that their child is alive rather than dead. So actually, it's quite significant that I'm saying we shouldn't kill any children. Like that's basically his logic. He's saying that the main thing they care about is not having something worse happen to them, which I guess is true. The NHS staff probably don't want anything worse to happen to them. And then he's saying I'm not doing anything worse to them by giving them a 2.5% increase. It's not a 2.5% decrease, which is
I mean that's the thing.
Logic.
You're trying to inspire people to go out and vote for you.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like we said before, you can go back to our last video on Starmer to see about 70% of Hartlepool voters would like to see the NHS be given between a 5 or 10% pay rise. And that, again, it's such an easy. We've just had a pandemic. Campaign on that. Why aren't you just going out and hanging your hat on that and saying, we'll give them a 10% pay rise, even though it's not 12.5. That's a damn bit closer. But you just don't do any. It's just so frustrating. We also had the fact that Starmer refused to sign this Unite letter. That Unite is a trade union, and basically they had a letter demanding an end to fire and rehire. He had no interest in signing that. Also, he didn't make any argument to attract voters based on, economic or workers' rights. A typical Labour platform. He just didn't want to do it. Instead, what he spent a lot of time doing is saying the phrase, the Labour Party is under new management. I think probably about 20 million times he kind of said, or almost said, I am not Jeremy Corbyn. And maybe, Starmer and the Labour right were, I guess, deluded enough to think that would be enough, that would work. I mean, you take this tweet from the leader of Basildon Council. So as you can see, it's actually a reply to an Owen Jones tweet. He said on February the 28th, genuine question, what message are Labour canvassers supposed to take to the doorstep exactly? This is not trolling. I honestly do not know the answer to this. So that's what he said, and as it turns out, I think Owen Jones's analysis of that was correct given these recent election results. And Councillor Gavin Callaghan had a reply though. Again, this guy was the head of Basildon Council. That we've changed and are now a serious political party after 4 years of total incompetent nonsense. It's going down well. It's going down so well that Labour on Thursday night lost control of Basildon Council. And Gavin Callaghan is no longer leader of Basildon Council because of Labour's poor results in that area. I have to point that out, Michael, because I think that was kind of funny, don't you think?
No, yeah, I mean, I think it's a case of they want to believe it's going down well, and they're deluding themselves,
Yeah.
and obviously they're reaping the results of that.
Yeah, that's the thing. They've been complaining about Corbyn for the last few years, and they've maybe they've tricked themselves into thinking, yeah, we just need to say we're not Jeremy Corbyn. And as you can tell from Basildon and other places around England, it did not work. But maybe I'm being too harsh to Starmer, because of course, not only did he say I'm not Jeremy Corbyn, he had these ideas to wrap himself up in the British flag, or wrap Labour in the British flag to be more specific. And if I can direct your attention to this extract from The Guardian, which I think is a brilliant extract, it says that Labour's head office was, quote, obsessed with us getting a flag, said one organiser, bemoaning what they felt was a lack of substance to justify it. There was no fleshing out what the flag means, or what policies have changed because we're now patriotic. It was just bung a flag up. And I mean, and look, that's the thing. We laughed at Labour. Well, I did anyway when I did that video on Starmer, and he was like, Labour need to dress smarter, and we need to be more patriotic. Put like flags in their Twitter bios, and it's like, is that all? Is that all you've got? But it literally seems that's all they've got. Just put the flag up. I mean, they are so devoid of any ideas. It is just all so vapid and just like shockingly bad. It is like something that out of the thick of it. And it's incredible that these people are involved with trying to win votes. Just bung a flag up. That's all we need.
No, yeah, and I think obviously the point that was made in the Guardian article is that there was no attempt to actually communicate any substantive patriotism, and obviously, I think if Labour did kind of try to communicate that, it would have to be a sort of attempt to woo their more traditional working class base, because of course, there are a lot of working class people who are quite fiercely patriotic, but the funny thing is that they literally thought they could just, wear a flag and that would help. And of course, the reality is that I think the people who didn't vote for Labour were smarter than that, and obviously Labour can't just play both sides by being a generically sort of liberal party on social issues and then being like, but we've got a flag so we're patriotic. They need to actually try to speak to obviously the way that you can be a left-wing progressive party, and obviously left-wing progressive party by Labour's standards, while also being patriotic and showing enthusiasm for the community that exists on a national level, and try and drive that home, and also drive home how the Conservatives can be destructive to Britain.
Yeah,
it's not difficult to have a social democratic or indeed social liberal messaging that is patriotic, but Labour just thought, we'll just say nothing but wear a flag while doing it.
Yeah, again, going back to the nurses, you could have tied it to the NHS. Like, look how proud we should be of our NHS. This is a British invention. It literally was. We should reward those who serve in our NHS. That, I guess it's a kind of a patriotic thing. Or you could tie it to the fact that, big businesses often, have tax cuts or tax loopholes that deprive money from Britain. Like, you can go down a patriotic path. And actually, tie it to, left-wing policies. That is possible. But yeah, again, Labour completely did not want to do that at all. And there is one more thing, Michael, which is quite funny to me. And that was that Labour did not have a lot of money to campaign in these elections. This is a tweet from Sam Coates at Sky. I'm told there's been one other reason for combining the elections and holding Hartlepool today, which of course, Labour didn't have to have the Hartlepool by-election on the 6th of May, but they chose to do it. And that reason was apparently cost. Labour is pretty cash-strapped. Some staff expected to depart soon. You could combine promotional material for MP, council and metro mayors and keep down expense. So Labour don't have a lot of money at the moment, Michael. And that could be another reason why they aren't doing so well. And, I don't think that's so surprising when you consider that, the Labour Party have tried to piss off a lot of Corbyn supporters who, of course, were Labour Party members who gave like a lot of low donations to the Labour Party, but of course all of that eventually adds up. And then you had that situation a few months ago where Labour paid out to people on Panorama who sued the Labour Party after the Labour Party basically said, these allegations on anti-Semitism that people in this Panorama documentary are making, they aren't true. And Labour's lawyers advised that they'd win this case. But the Labour Party decided to just pay these people anyway, and that will of course cost a bunch of money. I think all of this contributes to the fact that Labour, yeah, they don't have a lot of money, and of course the Conservatives are swimming in money. How many big money donations do they get? But yeah, again, it's just a stupid decision to try and piss off a lot of your members who give you money, because then they won't give you money. Oh, and then you can't compete in elections. Look at that.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, money is not as huge in the UK as it is in the US, and that's a good thing. But obviously, having a little bit of grassroots support, and obviously with the way that membership works with Labour, which is, of course, you get money by the fact people are members, that's all very good. And obviously, the fact that Jeremy Corbyn drove up membership was tremendously useful. And it's kind of, I guess, arrogant that Labour thought they could just continue easily without that monetary support. And of course, it's ridiculous that they seem to be so cavalier about money, throwing it away on court cases, with that being the case. Just ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you wonder what they were expecting. One of the reasons why Labour enjoyed success in 2017 under Corbyn was they had a lot of money to play with because of all the new members, and they have this Labour, right faction tried to strangle that. And we'll get onto the reasons why they have perhaps done that in the next video. But yeah, so those are basically the short-term reasons as to why Labour didn't do so well. But now we're going to talk about the long-term reasons, Michael. And again, we're going to focus on Hartlepool because, it's the big headline news story. And basically, Hartlepool and other places, they are, of course, known as the quote-unquote Red Wall constituencies, these traditional Labour heartlands that have been drifting away from Labour for the past 20 years. In fact, each year since 1997, Labour's share of the votes in Hartlepool has declined. As you can see from the graph right now. It did go down to 41% in 2004, then go back up to 52% in 2005. That 2004 was a by-election, so perhaps we can excuse that. But as you can see, in general elections, 61% in 97, 59 in 2001, then 52 in 2005, then 43 in 2010, then 36 in 2015. Oh, and look at that. A big jump up to 53% in 2017, then back down to 38%. And of course, in 2021, it was 28%. So, Michael, why has this happened? Why has there been a long-term decline in these quote-unquote Red Wall constituencies? Do you want to have a say on that?
Yeah, and I think the obvious reason is something we've kind of hinted at already, which is that Labour have completely failed to tap into the reality that a lot of these people have rejected, I guess, neoliberal individualism. And you can characterize this kind of uncharitably by saying that they're nationalists or whatever else, but the reality is these are people who have an enthusiasm for a sense of collective identity. And I think that is quite a common thing amongst working class people. They're not big fans of the whole rugged individualism thing, and that's sort of what Labour have brought to the table ever since Tony Blair, of course, won the election in 1997. So what Labour should have really been doing is tapping into that sense of community and empowering kind of local areas, which is obviously what the Conservatives have not been doing. And one of the things they could, of course, pointed out is that the Conservatives have been systemically trying to reduce the amount of funding that lots of Labour voting areas are getting, have actually been increasing their austerity against places where the Conservatives have no chance of winning anyway. And Labour really could have pointed out that the Conservatives have been the ones who have been funneling money to London, funneling away from many of these areas. And pointing out, the contrast to that, which is the reality that you can have a party that will support local communities and incorporate that into a, again, if they're going to be Keir Starmer's Labour, social liberal at best message. But yeah, I think that's kind of the issue. I'm not going to say that Labour should ever become full on, anti-immigration, all that sort of stuff, but they can, I think, appeal to the sensibilities of many of their anti-immigration working class voters through a sort of patriotic message that, as we've already covered, could incorporate the reality of how a community and collectivism needs to be part of a sincere patriotism.
Yeah, Michael, and I would say they kind of did that back in 2017. That's why you see 53% of the vote in a place like Hartlepool compared to, 36% in 2015? That's a massive jump. That's the thing. 2017 in places like Hartlepool was crazy because it just reversed this trend. Yeah, you're right, Michael. I mean, I think you look at, your average working class people or lower middle class, in a place like Hartlepool, they just do not trust Labour anymore. And of course, there are specific reasons for individual results in each general election, but the issue is that Labour consistently has not done anything to address the decline in these areas. When they were in power and, out of power, they supported the neoliberal economic consensus that harmed these areas, and for many years did until, Corbyn backed away from austerity when he became leader in 2015. And, of course, then in 2017, in their first general election, they had a big success in places like Hartlepool. And of course, after 2019, you had the Brexit election. But yeah, I think this is the case in a lot of traditional Labour heartlands, that these places have just been decimated over the past 20 years, especially since that 2008 economic crisis. But also, crucially, this decline has had a knock-on effect. What it has meant is that young people have decided to leave these areas to find jobs in major cities. And of course, we know young people, because they're more socially liberal, are more likely to vote for, say, Labour or the Green Party, for instance, which is why, the Labour vote in recent years in cities has increased quite a bit. But what has been left behind is, these older working class voters who, again, don't trust Labour and they like what the Conservatives say about immigration. But also, what has been left behind is often wealthier older people who own homes in these areas. Suddenly they have more voting power, and those people, what party they like to vote for again? It's the Conservatives. So not addressing the decline in these areas really does have a knock-on effect, where the people that stay there don't trust Labour, and then the people that would vote for Labour then leave to go to other places. So yeah, of course, when you think of it like that, yeah, it's no surprise that places like Hartlepool, these red wall areas, are drifting further and further towards the Conservatives, and now a lot of them are just Conservative. Like that's a 23% win for the Conservatives in Hartlepool. That's massive. And yeah, I would not be surprised if Keir Starmer were leader in the next general election, that would be repeated. So yeah, that's why I wanted to bring this up, because here's the thing, it's not just Starmer, although he was very shit, it is also like this long-term trend. But it is, I guess, funny to see people who don't want to blame Starmer, who have to finally acknowledge that Labour's electoral losses in places like Hartlepool it's not all down to Corbyn. And again, I would point out very strongly the fact that the 2017 election was the only election in the last 20 years, certainly the general election, where Labour increased the share of the vote. 2017 is the key to all this, Michael. Just like Jar Jar Binks was the key to the Phantom Menace. That's how I feel. No, but seriously, 2017 is the key to all this. And yeah, we're going to talk about 2017 more in our next video, discussing whether Labour and Starmer are making the right moves to try and turn things around after these results. Yeah, let's see if that's the case. But yeah, basically this situation, all very bleak and depressing. But yeah, still stick with us, Michael, because we'll tell you what's going on, right?
Your only trustworthy news source.
Yeah, that's it. That's Dankpol for you. See you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.